Good morning and welcome to our introduction to Habakkuk. And as we continue this journey through the Bible in a year. If you can imagine a picture of a person on a watchtower. The watchtower was the kind of early world's early warning system. You know, the watchman was the far-seeing guardian of a city, and they had three vital tasks. The first was to observe what was approaching the city. The second was to interpret what they had observed. So was that approaching person or approaching group of people? Was it friend? Was it foe? And then the third thing was to proclaim what they had observed and what they had interpreted to the city as a whole, so that they might know that it was either a friend or a foe who was approaching. And Habakkuk very much sees himself as this watchman for God's people, but also for the world, in terms of speaking about the oncoming danger that he had discerned and interpreted was coming into society. And what he announces really is the greatest danger for a society, and it has been the greatest wrestle of a society since the very beginning of time. It is the wrestle of our societies today, the wrestle of our societies, whether they are Western societies or Eastern or Far Eastern, non-European or non-first world countries. It is the great problem for all of them, and we see that in the first few words of this book of Habakkuk. So he says here in verse 3 of chapter 1, "Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife, conflict abounds. Therefore the law is paralyzed and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous so that justice is perverted." This idea of an unjust society, where the voices of the poor and the marginalized are neglected, where the rich and powerful prevail at the expense of everybody else. These are not simply old world questions that Habakkuk was wrestling with, but he stands as a watchman on the tower for us in today's society as well, in that this is the danger that we see coming. This is what we see coming. We see coming injustice. We see a perversion of justice. We see a paralyzing of the law that seeks to protect people. You know, you don't need to look around the country far too long before you see that these are issues that we are wrestling with today and that the world is wrestling with today. So how do we interpret those things? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Well, the rest of Scripture would indicate to us that that's a bad thing, because those things, justice and the law, are meant to be protectors against those particularly who are most at risk of being marginalized and most unlikely to receive fairness and justice. And so when those things fall apart, society as a whole is falling apart as well. And that's part of Habakkuk's message. What he's wrestling with, and it's ironic because his name means the one who embraces and grapples with and wrestles with. We don't really know very much about Habakkuk at all. The information we have certainly is not big enough for us to kind of piece together a life story about him, but he sees this threat, and it is embodied really for him in the Babylonian Empire, the Chaldeans, and so on. And so that's the picture that he paints as a warning to society and the rest of it. But there's a great call that's there in Habakkuk chapter 3. Again, only a 3-chapter book. But this is actually in the words of a song that I think was in the 80s or early 90s. So answers on a postcard or the WhatsApp if you want to see if you can work out what this comes from. But it says here in his prayer in chapter 3, "Lord, I have heard of your fame, and I stand in awe of your deeds, Lord. Renew them in our day, and in our time make them known. In wrath, remember mercy. So, Habakkuk's saying, I remember what you've done. I've grown up on the stories of what you've done, like many people in Israel's history. And I pray, Lord, renew them in our day and in our time, make them known. What a great prayer to pray when we read the Bible and we read of the wonderful things that God has done, and we read about how he's rescued his people, to say, Lord, would you do that in our time? Would you renew those deeds again for us? Or when we see great moves of the Spirit in recent centuries and the Welsh revivals and so on, our prayer, Lord, would you renew those acts in our day and do them again in our time? But much like the call of Micah a few days ago that we heard in chapter 6, to act justly. So we need to work for a just society. And what is our voice as Christians going to be as we hear the word coming down from the watchtower that this is a great issue for our time as well? And what are the systems that perpetuate that lack of justice and that breaking down of laws that seek to protect and to serve people? What is our response to that as Christians, and how do we take a stand on the side of justice and on the side of those who perhaps are not receiving justice in the ways that the Bible calls us to honour? So they're all great questions again to come out of this just a 3-chapter book, the story of Habakkuk. And so I pray that as we grapple with that, no pun intended on the meaning of Habakkuk's name, as we wrestle with that together today, I pray that God might bless you in that.